The envelope in my hand was damp from the sleet blowing off Great Miami River. At 79, my fingers don't work like they used to. They're stiff, scarred by 40 years of turning wrenches in the heat of a Dayton factory. I stood in the lobby of the Social Security office, my old VA ball cap pulled low. I wasn't there for a handout. I was there because my check hadn't arrived, and the pantry was down to a single sleeve of saltines and a jar of peanut butter. "Next," a woman called out. Her voice was flat, like she was reading a serial number. I stepped up to the plexiglass. "Morning, ma'am. I'm Raymond Carter. My direct deposit, it didn't hit. I checked the ATM at the Speedway twice." She didn't look up. She typed for a moment, the clicking of the keys sounding like hail on a tin roof. "Mr. Carter, your benefits have been redirected to the Greystone Recovery Group. There's a court-ordered garnishment for a private medical debt." I felt a cold spike in my chest. Debt? I don't owe anyone. I paid Martha's hospital bills off 3 years ago. I worked overtime at the plant until my knees gave out just to clear her name. "The system shows a signature, sir, a personal guarantee signed 6 months ago." I leaned against the counter, my breath hitching. I hadn't signed anything, but David, my son, had come by 6 months ago with tax papers for me to help him with. I'd trusted him. I'd given him my pen and my pride. I walked out into the Ohio gray, the wind cutting through my thin navy surplus jacket. I needed to call David, but my prepaid phone was out of minutes. I walked 3 miles to the Walmart just to use their display phones, my boots leaking slush. When I finally reached him, the line clicked open. "Dad? I'm busy, okay? I told you, don't call me at work," David snapped. "David, the SSA, they took my money. They say I signed for a loan of yours. I can't pay the electric, son. They're coming to shut it off today." There was a long silence. I looked at my reflection in a nearby television screen, a tired old man with a hollow face. "Look, it's just a mistake in the paperwork, Dad. I'll fix it next month. Just go to a food pantry or something. I gotta go." He hung up. I stood there holding the plastic receiver, surrounded by the bright, happy noise of shoppers, realizing my own son had turned me into a ghost. Then my pocket vibrated with the last bit of battery I had. A text from the utility company said my power was officially disconnected. The house was 52 degrees when I got home. It's a small place on the edge of town, the kind of house where the floorboards groan like they're remembering better days. I didn't take my coat off. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the stack of blue envelopes tucked into a shoebox. For 2 years, I've written to my grandson, Leo. He's 10 now. David hasn't let me see him since Martha's funeral. David said I was too depressing to be around, that my stories about the war and the factory gave the kid nightmares. So I wrote letters instead. I told Leo about how to catch a smallmouth bass in the river, how to tell when a storm is coming by the smell of the air, and how much his grandmother loved the way he laughed. I never got a single reply, not a birthday card, not a drawing, nothing. I opened the fridge. The light didn't come on. In the shadows, I saw the small plastic vial of Martha's leftover heart medication. I keep it there, even though she's gone, because the sight of her name on the label makes me feel like she's still in the next room. Beside it was a single egg. I didn't eat it. I walked to the back porch and called for Buster, my old golden retriever. He's got cataracts and moves as slow as I do. I cracked the egg over his dry kibble. It was the last of the food. "Eat up, buddy," I whispered, patting his flank. "One of us ought to have a full belly." I spent the evening by candlelight, the wax dripping onto the Formica tabletop. I took out a fresh sheet of paper. My hand was shaking from the cold, but I had to write to Leo. I had to tell him that even if his father was angry, I still loved them both. I told him about the time David caught his first home run at the Dayton Dragons game. I wrote until the candle flickered out. I walked to the mailbox at the end of the gravel drive to flag down the mailman the next morning.
I needed to see a human face. When the mail truck pulled up, the carrier, a young man named Marcus, looked at me with pity. "Mr. Carter, you're looking a bit blue. You okay?" "Just the winter, Marcus. Hey, did anything come for me? Maybe a small package? A letter from Cincinnati?" Marcus looked through his stack and shook his head. "Nothing but a final notice from the water department, Ray. I'm sorry." As he drove away, I looked down at the letter I was holding for Leo. I noticed something in the ditch by the mailbox, a flash of blue. I leaned down, my hips screaming in protest, and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from the frozen mud. It was one of my letters to Leo, unopened, with "Return to Sender" stamped on it in David's handwriting, right next to a note that said, "Stop bothering us, old man."
I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the mud-stained letter resting on my knees. The "stop bothering us" wasn't just a rejection, it was a blade. I'd spent 43 years working double shifts so David could go to college, had skipped meals so he could have the right sneakers for basketball. Now I was an inconvenience to be discarded like a rusted part. The house grew colder. I could see my breath in the moonlight. I pulled Martha's old handmade quilt around my shoulders, but the chill was deeper than the skin. It was in my bones. The next morning, a black SUV pulled into my drive. 2 men in suits got out. They didn't look like neighbors. They looked like the end of something. I met them on the porch, trying to stand tall, trying to keep my dignity even though I hadn't bathed in 2 days because the water was cold. "Mr. Raymond Carter?" the taller one asked. He held a clipboard like a shield. "That's me. We're with Greystone Recovery. We've acquired the deed to this property as part of the settlement for the defaulted business loan you co-signed for David Carter. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." I felt the world tilt. "The deed? This house is paid off. I burnt the mortgage papers 10 years ago." "You put the house up as collateral, sir. Your signature is notarized." My son hadn't just stolen my pension, he'd stolen the roof over my head. He knew I'd sign anything he put in front of me because I loved him. I thought I was helping him start a business. Instead, I was funding a lifestyle he couldn't afford, and I was the one paying the price. "I have nowhere to go," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "That's not our concern, Mr. Carter. 48 hours. If you're still here, the sheriff will remove you." They left. I walked back inside and looked at the walls. Every scratch in the baseboards was a memory. There was the height chart on the pantry door where David grew up. There was the spot on the rug where Martha collapsed. I picked up the phone again. I didn't care about the minutes. I called David. It went straight to voicemail. "David," I said into the silence, "they're taking the house. Please, I just need a place for me and Buster, just for a few weeks until I can talk to the VA. 10 minutes later, I got a text. "I told you I'm handled it. Stop drama queening, Dad. I'm in Florida for a conference. I'll call you when I'm back. Don't call again." He wasn't in Florida. I could see his Instagram, or what I could manage to see on the slow data, showing him at a steakhouse in downtown Dayton, laughing with friends. He was 10 miles away while I was freezing in the dark. I didn't pack much. When you've lived 79 years, you realize most things are just clutter. I packed my medals, a photo of Martha on our wedding day, and Buster's leash. I put on my old Army rucksack. It felt heavier than it did in '68. I walked to the bus stop with Buster limping beside me. People looked away as we passed. In America, an old man with a dog and a backpack is invisible. We're part of the scenery, like a cracked sidewalk or a dead tree. We spent the night at the bus station. The plastic chairs were hard, and the security guard kept tapping his baton against the metal, telling me I couldn't sleep there. I stayed awake, stroking Buster's head, watching the clock tick toward morning. Every hour felt like a year. When the sun finally came up, I headed to the only place I had left, the VA hospital. I figured maybe they could help me find a shelter that took dogs. Buster is all I have. If I lose him, I'm just a body waiting for a hole in the ground. The
The waiting room was packed. Men with missing limbs, men with hollow eyes, all of us waiting for a turn to be told the system was backlogged. I sat there for 6 hours, my stomach cramping so hard I had to double over. "Mr. Carter," a nurse finally called. I stood up, but my legs felt like water. I stumbled and my rucksack spilled open. My letters to Leo, dozens of them, some mud-stained, some pristine, scattered across the linoleum. A young woman picked one up. She looked at the address. "These are all to the same person," she said softly. "They're all unopened." "He's my grandson," I said, trying to gather them with shaking hands. He's busy. He'll get to 'em." The nurse helped me to a chair. "Mr. Carter, your blood pressure is dangerously high, and you're severely dehydrated. When was the last time you ate?" I couldn't remember. I looked at the letters on the floor. "I just need a place for my dog. Can you help me with that?" She looked at me with a sadness that hurt worse than the hunger. "We can't have animals in the ward, sir. You'll have to leave him outside." I looked at Buster. He was looking at me with those cloudy eyes, trusting me to take care of him. I stood up and slung my pack over my shoulder. "Then I guess I'm staying outside too," I said. I walked out the sliding doors, back into the biting Ohio wind, and collapsed on a concrete bench. I didn't feel the cold anymore. I just felt a strange, heavy sleepiness pulling at my eyelids.
I woke up to the sound of a car door slamming. For a moment, I thought I was back in the jungle, the humidity thick and the trees screaming. But the air was freezing, and the only sound was Buster whining low in his throat. A man was standing over me. It wasn't David. It was a guy in a high-vis vest, a city worker. "Hey, Pops, you can't be out here. It's supposed to drop to 15 degrees tonight. You'll freeze solid." I tried to sit up, but my back felt like it was fused together. "I'm just resting, waiting for the bus." "The buses stopped running 2 hours ago," he said, shaking his head. "Look, there's a shelter 3 blocks down, St. Jude's. They're full, but they might let you sit in the hall." I thanked him and stood up. My legs were numb. I walked toward the shelter, pulling Buster along. But when I got there, the line was wrapped around the building. Men half my age were shivering, some of them shouting, some of them crying. I stood at the back of the line. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was a woman with a kind face, wrapped in a thick scarf. "Sir, you should go to the front. They prioritize the elderly." I shook my head. "I've waited my turn my whole life. I won't start skipping now." She looked at my VA cap. "Thank you for your service," she whispered. She reached into her pocket and handed me a granola bar. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I gave half to Buster. As we stood there, a silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. My heart leapt. I knew that car. It was David's. He must have seen my messages. He must have realized what he'd done. The window rolled down. David looked at me, but his face wasn't full of regret. It was full of embarrassment. "Dad, what the hell are you doing? My boss lives 2 blocks from here. If he sees you standing in a homeless line, it looks bad for me. You're ruining my reputation." I walked to the car window, my breath coming in short, painful bursts. "David, they took the house. I have nowhere to go. Please, just for tonight." "I told you I'm dealing with it. I'm filing an appeal. Just go stay at a motel. Here." He reached into his console and threw a $20 bill out the window. It fluttered into a puddle of slush. "Don't call me again until you've cleaned yourself up. You look like a vagrant," he said, and he drove off, splashing dirty water onto my only pair of pants. I looked at the $20 floating in the muck. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. My dignity was the only thing I had left, and it was currently drowning in a Dayton gutter. I found a spot under the bridge near the old factory where I used to work. It felt poetic in a hollow sort of way. I'd spent 40 years maintaining the machines inside those walls, and now I was sleeping in the dirt beneath the shadow of the smokestacks. I built a small fire with some scrap wood and a newspaper I found. The headlines were all about the booming economy and the new luxury lofts being built downtown. I used the paper to start the flame, watching the words "local prosperity" turn to ash. I pulled out my shoebox of letters. I had one left that I hadn't mailed. It was meant for Leo's 11th birthday, which was tomorrow. "Dear Leo," I wrote by the flickering orange light. "I might not be around to see you grow into a man, but I want you to remember one thing. A man is only as good as his word and as kind as his heart. Don't let the world make you hard. Don't let money make you blind." As I wrote, I heard footsteps. 3 teenagers were walking down the embankment. They had hoods up and were laughing, but the laughter stopped when they saw me. "Yo, look at this guy. He's got a fire and everything. Hey, old man, you got any money?" I didn't look up. I have nothing but my memories and my dog. Leave us be. The tall one kicked my shoebox. The letters spilled out into the dirt. "Letters? Who writes letters anymore? You're a dinosaur." He reached for my rucksack. Buster let out a low, protective growl, the first time I'd heard him find his voice in years. "Shut that dog up," the kid barked, raising a heavy boot. I stood up. My knees popped and my back screamed, but I stood straight. I looked that boy in the eye with the stare I used to give the new recruits in the jungle. "You touch that dog and you'll find out what 40 years of heavy labor does to a man's grip," I said, my voice low and steady. For a second he hesitated. He saw the fire in my eyes, the last spark of the man I used to be. He spat on the ground and backed away. "Whatever, you're gonna freeze anyway." They ran off into the night. I knelt down to gather my letters. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pick them up. I realized then that David was right about one thing. I was a dinosaur. The world I knew, where people looked out for each other, was gone. I curled up next to Buster, his warmth the only thing keeping my heart beating. I closed my eyes and prayed to Martha. "I'm tired, honey. I'm so very tired." The next morning, the sun was a pale, weak thing. I woke up because Buster was licking my face. He was shivering violently. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the cold was taking him. I knew I couldn't stay under the bridge. I had to do something. I gathered my things and walked toward the center of town. I passed a florist shop, the window filled with bright, expensive roses. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day. I remembered David's wife, Sarah. She had always been kinder than David. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe David had lied to her about where I was. I spent my last few coins on a payphone at a gas station. I called her cell. "Sarah, it's Raymond." "Raymond, where are you? David said you moved into a senior living community in Florida. He said you wanted a fresh start and asked us not to call for a while so you could settle in." My heart went cold. Florida. "Sarah, I'm at the Sunoco on 5th Street. I'm homeless. David, he took the house. He took my pension." There was a gasp on the other end. "He told me the house was sold to pay for your luxury care. He said you were happy." "Raymond, stay there. I'm coming. I'm bringing Leo." I sat on the curb holding Buster. 20 minutes later, a minivan pulled in. Sarah jumped out, her face pale. Behind her was Leo. He'd grown so much. He looked just like David did at that age. "Grandpa?" Leo whispered, looking at my tattered clothes and my matted beard. I tried to smile, but my lips were cracked. "Hey there, birthday boy." Sarah was crying. "He told us you were gone. He said you didn't want to see us. He even showed us emails from you saying you were busy with your new friends." He'd faked emails. He'd erased me. Sarah looked at the shoebox in my lap. "What are those?" "Letters," I said. "I wrote one every week for 2 years. I thought Leo was just too busy to write back." Leo stepped forward and took a letter from the top. He looked at the postmark. "I never saw these, Grandpa. Dad told me you forgot about us." As Leo opened the first letter,
A black sedan pulled into the gas station. It was David. He must have tracked Sarah's phone. He stepped out of the car, looking furious. "Sarah, get in the car, now," he commanded. "Dad, I told you to stay away from my family." I stood up, leaning against the gas pump. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a father. I felt like a judge. "Your family?" I asked, my voice echoing off the metal canopy of the station. "The family you lied to? The son you told I was dead to him? The wife you cheated with your stories?" David walked toward me, his face turning a dark, ugly red. "I did what I had to do. The business was failing. I was going to lose everything. You're old, Dad. You don't need a 3-bedroom house. You don't need that money. I'm the one with the future." "I stole my life, David," I said quietly. "I would have given you anything if you'd asked, but you didn't ask. You hunted me." Sarah stepped between them. "We're done, David. I'm taking Raymond and Leo to my mother's house. You can find a lawyer." "With what money?" David laughed harshly. "The accounts are in my name. The house is gone. The Greystone debt is settled. I won." He looked at me with a sneer. "Go ahead. Tell the police. It's all legal. You signed the papers. A confession of judgment. You're just a senile old man who made a bad investment." I looked at Leo. The boy was reading one of my letters. Tears were streaming down his face. "Grandpa," Leo said, ignoring his father, "in this letter, you talked about the emergency box in the floorboards of the garage, the one you and Martha made." David froze. I'd forgotten about that. When Martha and I were young, we didn't trust banks. We'd put away a little of every paycheck into a steel box, bolted to the foundation under the workbench. "That's just old stories, kid. There's nothing in that garage but junk." "No," I said, a memory sparking. "I never told you about that box, David. I only told Martha, and I wrote it in a letter to Leo 6 months ago because I wanted him to have something for college that you couldn't touch." David's eyes went wide. He realized he'd missed something. He'd been so busy stealing my present that he'd ignored the legacy I was trying to leave for the future. "That box belongs to the property owner now," David said, his voice shaking. "And that's the bank, or me." He scrambled back into his car and sped off, tires screeching. He was heading for the old house. He was going to rip up the floorboards to steal from his own son. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Let him go, Raymond. We have to get you to a doctor." "No," I said, feeling a strange surge of energy. "We need to go to the house, not for the money, for the truth."
When we arrived at my old house, the Greystone locks were already on the door, but David had smashed a window to get in. We could hear the sound of a sledgehammer hitting concrete from the garage. We walked in through the front door. The house was empty. The furniture I'd had for 40 years was gone, probably sold on Facebook for pennies. We stood in the doorway of the garage. David was covered in dust, sweating, his expensive suit ruined. He'd found the spot under the workbench. He'd pried up the boards and was hacking at the concrete. "I found it!" he yelled, his voice sounding manic. "I see the metal!" He reached in and pulled out a small, rusted gray box. He didn't even look at us. He used a crowbar to snap the lock. He flung the lid open. His face fell. He didn't find stacks of hundreds. He didn't find gold. He found a stack of old yellowed papers and a single heavy brass key. I walked forward. My legs didn't hurt anymore. "Martha and I stopped putting cash in there in the 80s, David. We realized inflation would eat it up." I reached out and took the papers from his limp hands. They weren't currency. They were the original, unfiled life insurance policies Martha had taken out on herself, along with a series of savings bonds she'd bought in Leo's name, not mine. But there was something else, a small micro-cassette tape labeled "For David when he thinks he's lost his way." David sat on the dirty garage floor and put the tape into an old recorder I still had on the bench. Martha's voice filled the room. She sounded so young. "David, honey, if you're opening this, it means you're looking for a shortcut. Your father and I know you. You've always been impatient. But your father, he's the strongest man I know. He'd give his life for you. Don't ever trade his love for something that can be bought." David began to sob, not the fake sob of a man caught, but the jagged, ugly cry of a boy who realized he'd killed the only thing that truly mattered. He looked up at me. "Dad, the debt, I was so scared of failing." I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had let me freeze, who had stolen my dignity, and who had tried to erase my existence. "You did fail, David," I said softly. "You failed the only test that mattered." Suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the driveway. Sarah had called the police the moment David broke the window. The police took David away in handcuffs for the breaking and entering, but the legal battle for the house would take months. It didn't matter. I wasn't going back there. That house was a shell. The home was in the people. Sarah and Leo took me in. I have a small room with a window that looks out over a park. Buster has a bed right next to mine. My pension was restored after the VA lawyers got a look at the fraudulent signatures David had used. It turns out, when you're a veteran with 40 years of clean living, people tend to believe you over a son with a gambling problem and a paper trail of lies. I'm sitting on the porch today. It's spring in Ohio now. The air smells like damp earth and hope. Leo is sitting at my feet. He's not on his phone. He's holding a stack of blue envelopes. "Read the one from last Christmas, Grandpa," he says. I open it and read the words I wrote when I was at my lowest. I read about how the stars look the same whether you're in a foxhole or a factory. I read about how love is the only thing that doesn't rust. David is in a diversion program now. He sends letters. I haven't opened them yet, not because I'm angry, but because I'm not ready. Forgiveness is a heavy thing, and my back is still a bit sore from the winter. I lost my house. I lost my health for a while. I lost the son I thought I knew. But as I look at Leo, I realize I won the only thing worth keeping. I'm not a ghost anymore. I'm a grandfather. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not cold. I pick up my pen, and I have a new letter to start. This one doesn't need a stamp. I just hand it to the boy sitting next to me. "Here you go, Leo," I say. "This is the story of how we made it through the winter."